There's someone in your life, maybe a friend, a parent, a coworker, or even the person looking back at you in the mirror, who always seems fine. They smile at the right moments. They ask how you're doing. They show up. They help. They carry on. But behind all of that is a quiet, private storm they've never let anyone see. This isn't weakness. And it isn't dishonesty. It's a psychology far more complex than most people realize. Today, we're going deep into the minds of people who suffer in silence, why they do it, what it costs them, and what it says about them that most people never get to understand. First, let's be clear about who we're talking about. People who keep their pain to themselves are not rare. In fact, research consistently shows that a large portion of individuals experiencing depression, grief, anxiety, or trauma never speak about it openly, not to friends, not to family, and often not even to therapists. Psychologists sometimes refer to this pattern as emotional suppression or concealed distress, but those clinical terms miss the human reality of what's actually happening. These are people who have learned, through experience, through environment, through painful trial and error, that showing pain doesn't lead to relief. It leads to burden, to misunderstanding, to vulnerability in a world that hasn't always been safe for them. They are often the strongest people in any room, the ones others lean on, the fixers, the steady ones, and precisely because of that role, they feel they have no right to fall apart. So, where does this pattern begin? For many, it starts in childhood. Children are exquisitely sensitive to how their emotions are received by caregivers. If a child cries and is told to stop being dramatic, or shares fear and is met with dismissal, they learn a devastating lesson early. My pain is inconvenient to others. Over time, that lesson calcifies into identity. The child grows up and becomes an adult who feels deeply but expresses nothing because emotional expression was never a safe option. Attachment theory, developed by psychologist John Bowlby, helps explain this. Children who grow up with inconsistent or emotionally unavailable caregivers often develop what's called an avoidant attachment style. They become self-sufficient to an extreme degree. They don't ask for help. They don't share, not because they don't hurt, but because they've wired their nervous systems to expect that reaching out will lead to disappointment or rejection. There are also cultural factors at play. In many societies, particularly for men, emotional stoicism is treated as a virtue. Stay strong. Don't burden others. Handle it yourself. These messages are repeated so many times from so many directions that they stop sounding like expectations and start sounding like truth. And for some people, past experiences of sharing and being betrayed, a confidence broken, vulnerability weaponized, pain made into a joke, have taught them that openness carries real risk. So silence becomes the strategy. It feels like control, like protection, like the only reliable option. Now, here's what most people never see. The person who keeps their pain to themselves is not empty inside. Quite the opposite. Their inner world is often extraordinarily rich and extraordinarily heavy. Because they don't externalize, they internalize. Every emotion they suppress doesn't disappear. It gets processed alone in the middle of the night, during long drives, in the private spaces where no one can witness them. These are the people who cry in the shower, who hold it together in front of everyone, and then sit in their car for 10 minutes before they can walk into the house, who write things in journals they'll never show anyone, who feel things with an intensity that would surprise the people who think they know them. Psychologists have found that chronic emotional suppression is associated with increased activation of the body's stress response. The pain doesn't go away when it's not spoken. It goes inward. And over time, this pattern can contribute to anxiety, depression, physical illness, and a growing sense of loneliness that becomes harder and harder to name. The cruelest irony: the more silently they suffer, the more isolated they become. And the more isolated they become, the more convinced they are that no one would truly understand. One of the most sophisticated aspects of this psychology is the mask. People who hide their pain are often remarkably good at appearing well. Researchers call this high-functioning depression in clinical contexts, but it extends far beyond depression into grief, anxiety, trauma, and everyday suffering. They become fluent in the language of "I'm fine." They develop an almost instinctive ability to redirect conversations away from themselves. They ask the right questions, listen carefully, offer support, and create an impression of someone who simply doesn't need much. But the mask is exhausting. Maintaining the appearance of okayness while quietly unraveling underneath requires a tremendous expenditure of energy that could go toward healing. And the mask creates a painful distance, even in close relationships. The people who love them sense something is off, but can't name it. They feel shut out. And the person behind the mask feels unseen, but doesn't know how to lower the barrier they've spent years building. So, what do people like this actually need? This is important. They don't need to be fixed. They don't need to be pushed to open up before they're ready. Forced vulnerability rarely leads to healing. It often leads to deeper retreat. What they need is the experience of safety. Consistent, patient, non-pressuring safety. The rare and powerful feeling that someone is there, not to extract their story, not to offer immediate solutions, not to make them feel like a project, but simply to be present. They need people in their lives who can say, without agenda, "I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to explain yourself, but I'm here when you're ready." For those who recognize themselves in this description, the path forward is gradual. It's learning, slowly, carefully, that vulnerability doesn't have to mean collapse, that being known, truly known, is terrifying, but also the very thing that heals the wound that silence created. It often begins with small truths. One honest sentence to someone trustworthy, the quiet discovery that the world doesn't end when you let someone see a corner of what you carry. If you know someone like this, understand that their silence is not a wall against you. It's a wall they built to survive, and it was probably necessary once. And if you are someone like this, know this: there is nothing shameful in what you carry. The fact that you've carried it this long speaks to your strength, but strength was never meant to mean going through life alone. You are allowed to be seen. You are allowed to be held. You are allowed to put some of it down. The world tends to notice the people who are loudest about their pain, but some of the most profound suffering and some of the most remarkable resilience lives quietly in people just like you.